The rain on Taralis 4 never stopped. It wasn't the kind of rain that cleansed or renewed. It was industrial runoff mixed with condensation from the orbital platforms, falling in thick sheets that stained everything a dull gray. Daniel Rourke pulled his coat tighter as he navigated the narrow alleys of the port district, his boots splashing through puddles that reflected the neon blur of advertisement holograms. He had lived here for 3 years now, long enough for the constant dampness to seep into his bones, long enough to forget what real sunlight felt like. The import-export office where he worked processing shipping manifests was only 6 blocks from his apartment. But on nights like this, it felt like crossing an ocean. Daniel had chosen this life deliberately. After 15 years as a soldier bouncing between conflicts on the frontier worlds, he'd wanted nothing more than predictability. Wake up, process paperwork, go home, sleep. No surprises, no adrenaline. No watching friends die in battles over resources nobody on the core worlds would ever hear about. The market street was busier than usual despite the late hour. Merchants from a dozen different species hawked their wares under polymer tarps that did little to keep out the rain. A Rigelian was arguing with a human trader over the price of synthetic proteins. 2 Kalor guards in their distinctive bone-white armor stood watch outside a gambling den, their forearms crossed in a gesture that was universal across species. Don't even think about causing trouble. Daniel kept his head down and walked faster. He'd learned early that the best way to survive on Taralis 4 was to be invisible. Just another face in the crowd of refugees, traders, and opportunists who washed up on this backwater planet. That's when he saw her. She stood under a flickering streetlight near the entrance to what the locals generously called the entertainment district. At first glance, she could have passed for human, but the subtle ridge of scales along her jawline and the amber glow of her eyes marked her as a hybrid, half human, half Kalor, the worst of both worlds, as the saying went among the pure bloods of either species. She wore a dress that had once been expensive, made from off-world silk that shimmered even in the poor light. But the hem was torn, and water had left dark stains creeping up from the bottom. A small crowd had gathered around her, mostly dock workers coming off shift, their faces wearing the universal expression of men appraising merchandise. "One night," she was saying, her voice carrying despite the rain. "Just rent me one night." Daniel's stomach turned. He'd seen this before on other frontier worlds, when the economy collapsed or the local government changed hands. People did what they had to do to survive. But there was something different about this woman. The way she held herself, spine straight despite everything, shoulders back like she was standing at attention. Their eyes met across the crowd. For a moment, neither moved. Then she tilted her head slightly, and he saw something in her expression that didn't match her words. It wasn't desperation or resignation. It was calculation, assessment, like a soldier sizing up terrain. "You," she said, pointing directly at him. "You'll do." The crowd parted, suddenly interested in this development. Daniel felt every eye on him as she walked over, her bare feet silent on the wet pavement. Up close, he could see more details. A faint scar running from her left temple to her ear, hidden unless you knew where to look. The way her weight was distributed, ready to move in any direction. Fighter's stance. "I don't," Daniel started, but she cut him off. "One night, standard rate. Nothing complicated." Her amber eyes never left his. "Unless you're not interested." There was something in the way she said it, a challenge hidden beneath the words. The smart thing would be to walk away, go home to his empty apartment and his predictable life. But Daniel had survived 15 years of combat by learning to read people, and every instinct told him this woman was in trouble, real trouble, the kind that got people disappeared on Taralis 4. "Fine," he heard himself say. She smiled then, just a slight upturn of her lips. "Good choice." The transaction was handled through a grimy terminal mounted on the wall. the kind that didn't ask questions or keep records. Daniel input his credit code, trying not to think about how much of his monthly salary he'd just spent. The machine spat out a temporary access chip, which the woman pocketed without looking at it. "Lead the way," she said. The walk to Daniel's apartment building was silent, except for the rain and the distant hum of cargo shuttles. He could feel her presence behind him, matching his pace exactly. When they reached the entrance, the security scanner bathed them both in pale blue light before the door clicked open. His apartment was on the 8th floor. The elevator was broken, as always, so they took the stairs. She didn't complain, didn't even seem winded when they reached his door. Daniel fumbled with his keycard, suddenly aware of how small his place was, how bare the walls were. "It's not much," he said as the door opened. "It's perfect," she replied. And for the first time, her voice carried something that might have been genuine relief. The apartment was exactly what you'd expect from a mid-level clerk on Tiralis 4. One room that served as living area and bedroom, a kitchenette with a hot plate and a water recycler, a bathroom barely big enough to turn around in. The only personal touch was a shelf of actual paper books, a luxury on a world where everything was digital. The woman walked to the window and looked out at the rain-slicked city below. "You can call me Salira," she said without turning around. "Daniel," he replied, though he suspected she already knew that. "Daniel," she repeated, as if testing the name. "You're not from here." It wasn't a question, but he answered anyway. "Nobody's from here. Tiralis 4 is where you end up, not where you start." She turned then, and in the better light of his apartment, he could see how exhausted she was. Dark circles under her eyes, a slight tremor in her hands that she was trying to hide. "I need to be clear about something," Salira said. "The transaction is complete. You've paid, but I have conditions. No violence, no restraints, and you don't ask questions about things that don't concern you." Daniel nodded. "I wasn't planning on any of that." "Then what were you planning?" He moved to the kitchenette and started heating water on the hot plate. "Tea. Maybe something to eat if you're hungry. You look like you haven't had a real meal in days." Salira stared at him for a long moment. "That's it. Unless you'd prefer coffee. But I have to warn you, it's the synthetic stuff. Tastes like motor oil." She laughed then, a short, sharp sound that seemed to surprise her. "You're either the strangest human I've ever met or the most dangerous." "Just tired," Daniel said, pulling 2 cups from the cabinet. "Tired of this place. Tired of the rain. Tired of pretending everything's normal when nothing about this world is." Salira moved to the small table and sat down, her posture finally relaxing slightly. "You were military." Again, not a question. Daniel poured the hot water over the tea bags, the cheap synthetic leaves immediately turning the water a murky brown. "Was long time ago. Not that long. You still move like a soldier. Still check corners when you enter a room. Still position yourself between the door and potential threats." He set a cup in front of her. "And you move like a pilot. Fighter class. If I had to guess. The way you compensate for the gravity here. Like you're used to rapid changes in G-force." Salira wrapped her hands around the cup, letting the warmth seep into her fingers. "Was until 3 months ago." "What happened 3 months ago?" She looked up at him sharply. "I thought we agreed no questions." "You brought it up." They sat in silence for a moment, the only sound the rain against the window and the distant rumble of thunder. Finally, Salira sighed. "Have you ever heard of the Meridian Squadron?" Daniel's hand paused halfway to his cup. Everyone who'd served on the frontier knew about Meridian Squadron. Elite Kalor human hybrid unit. The best pilots in 3 sectors. They disappeared 6 months ago during what was supposed to be a routine patrol. Command said they'd gone rogue, turned pirate. "You were Meridian." She nodded. "Second Wing Commander. Until Governor Malkin decided we knew too much about his shipping operations." Daniel felt the pieces clicking into place. Malkin controlled half the trade routes through this sector, and everyone knew he was dirty. But he was also connected, protected by people in high places who benefited from his smuggling operations. He framed you, the whole squadron. Worse. Solera's voice was flat. He sold us. Used some old law about military deserters losing citizenship rights. Most of my squadron is scattered across the sector now, working in mines or pleasure houses or worse. I've been trying to find them, but... She gestured at herself. Resources are limited when you're legally classified as property. Daniel stood and moved to the window, processing this information. He'd come to Taralis 4 to escape this kind of thing, the corruption and betrayal that seemed to infect every corner of the frontier. But here it was, sitting at his table, drinking his terrible tea. "Why me?" he asked. "Why did you pick me out of that crowd?" "Because you looked at me like I was a person," Solera said simply. "Everyone else saw merchandise or opportunity. You saw someone in trouble. And you thought I'd help. I hoped you might listen. That's all I needed. Someone to listen." Daniel turned back to her. "Malkin has an army of lawyers and enough credits to buy this entire planet. What exactly do you think one burned-out ex-soldier can do?" Solera stood and pulled something from a hidden pocket in her dress. It was a data chip, military grade, the kind designed to survive anything short of a direct nuclear blast. "Meridian Squadron didn't just fly patrols," she said. "We also provided security for diplomatic meetings. Very sensitive diplomatic meetings. The kind where people discuss things they wouldn't want made public." Daniel stared at the chip. "You recorded them." "Every word, every deal, every bribe. 6 months of Governor Malkin thinking he was protected by the best pilots in the sector, not knowing we were documenting everything. That's enough to bury him. If it gets to the right people. But I can't do it alone. I try to leave this planet. I'll be detained as runaway property. I try to transmit it. They'll trace it back to me in seconds. I needed someone clean, someone with no connection to any of this." Daniel picked up the chip, feeling its weight. Such a small thing to hold so much danger. "You realize what you're asking if Malkin finds out." "He'll kill you," Solera finished, probably slowly. "He's creative that way. And you're okay with that, putting a stranger in that position." Her amber eyes flashed. "You're not a stranger. You're Daniel Rourke. Served with the 42nd Infantry on Kellis Prime. Earned 3 commendations for valor before requesting discharge after the incident at Marble Canyon. You've been hiding here for 3 years, processing shipping manifests and pretending you don't notice the illegal cargo that passes through your office every day." Daniel set the chip down carefully. "You've done your homework. I've been watching you for 2 weeks. You're the only person in that office who actually reports discrepancies. The only one who hasn't taken a bribe from Malkin's people. You're clean, competent, and despite your best efforts to pretend otherwise, you still have a conscience. Conscience is a luxury I can't afford. Yet, here we are," Solera said. "I'm sitting in your apartment, drinking your tea, and you haven't once tried to take advantage of the situation, even though legally, technically, you own me for the next..." She checked the wall display. 22 hours and 36 minutes. Daniel laughed bitterly. "I don't own anyone. I don't care what some corrupted AI registry says." "The registrar," Solera said quietly. "That's what Malkin uses. An old artificial intelligence from the colonial days, designed to track citizenship and property rights. He found a way to hack it, to rewrite records. That's how he made us disappear. In the eyes of the law, Meridian Squadron never existed. We're just unregistered hybrids who appeared out of nowhere. No history, no rights." Daniel had heard rumors about the registrar, but he'd assumed they were just stories. An AI that old should have been decommissioned decades ago. But if Malkin had found a way to resurrect it, to use it for his own purposes. "How many others?" he asked. Besides your squadron, hundreds that I know of. Maybe thousands. Anyone who crosses him. Anyone who sees too much or asks the wrong questions. Humans, hybrids, even pure-blood Kalor who don't have strong family connections. He turns them into ghosts, then sells them to the highest bidder. The rain had intensified, hammering against the window, like it was trying to break through. Daniel watched the water run down the glass in chaotic patterns, each droplet following its own path, but all ending up in the same place. "I need to think," he said. Salira nodded and moved to the far side of the room, giving him space. She sat on the floor with her back against the wall, a position that would let her see both the door and window. Old habits. Daniel picked up the data chip again, turning it over in his fingers. He'd spent 3 years building a quiet life here, staying under the radar, avoiding trouble. It wasn't much of a life, but it was safe, predictable, boring. He thought about the manifest he'd processed that morning. Agricultural supplies, according to the documentation. But the weight had been wrong, the distribution off. He'd flagged it, knowing full well his supervisor would unflag it as soon as he left. How many times had he done that? How many shipments of God knows what had he officially objected to while practically letting them through? "The transport schedules," he said suddenly. Salira looked up. "What about them?" "I process them every day. I know which ships are really Malkin's, which customs officers are on his payroll, which routes avoid inspection. If we're going to get this data off planet, I can find us a clean ship." Salira raised an eyebrow. Daniel met her gaze. "You said you needed someone with no connection to this. That stops being true the moment I help you. If we do this, we do it together, or not at all." She stood slowly, that fighter's grace evident in every movement. "You realize what you're risking?" "My exciting life of data entry and synthetic tea. Your life, period." Daniel shrugged. "I've been dead for 3 years, just going through the motions. Maybe it's time to remember what it feels like to actually fight for something." Salira crossed the room and held out her hand. "Partners." He shook it, noting the calluses from years of flight controls. "Partners. But first, you need sleep, and real food, and probably a shower. No offense." "None taken. I've been living in the Port District's underground for 2 weeks." Daniel gestured to the bathroom. "Water recycler's temperamental, but it's hot. There are clean clothes in the drawer. Might be big on you, but they're dry. I'll see what I can find for food." Salira hesitated at the bathroom door. "Why are you doing this, really?" Daniel thought for a moment. "Because I'm tired of pretending I don't see what this place really is. A feeding ground for parasites like Malkin. Maybe I can't change that, but I can at least try to save a few people from it." "A few people or one squadron?" "Let's start with one squadron and see where it goes." She nodded and disappeared into the bathroom. Daniel heard the water start and allowed himself a moment to consider what he'd just agreed to. Then he moved to his communication terminal and started pulling up shipping manifests. If they were going to war with Governor Malkin, they'd need to be smart about it. Outside, the rain continued to fall, washing the city's sins down into the harbor, where they'd mix with the industrial runoff and toxic waste, creating new poisons that would eventually fall as rain again. It was a cycle Teralis 4 had perfected. Corruption, feeding on itself endlessly. But cycles could be broken. It just took someone willing to throw a wrench in the gears. Daniel started cross-referencing ship registrations with departure times, looking for patterns. He'd found 3 possibilities when Salira emerged from the bathroom, wrapped in his oversized shirt and cargo pants, her hair still damp. "Find anything?" she asked, looking over his shoulder. "Maybe. There's a freighter leaving in 3 days, registered to a company on Nexus Prime. Clean record. No known connections to Malkin. But it's carrying medical supplies to the outer colonies. Humanitarian mission. If we use it and something goes wrong, we could be putting sick people at risk. Salira was quiet for a moment. My wing commander used to say that in war, there are no perfect choices, just choices you can live with. And can you live with this one? I can live with it better than leaving my people enslaved. Daniel nodded and marked the ship. Then we have 3 days to figure out how to get you and this data on board without triggering every security alert in the port. Actually, Salira said, sitting down at the table, I was thinking bigger. Bigger. The data proves Malkin's corruption, but it doesn't free my squadron, or any of the others. For that, we need to take down the registrar itself. Daniel turned to face her fully. You want to destroy an AI that's been embedded in the planetary government systems for decades. Not destroy, reset. Return it to its original parameters. Before Malkin's modifications. That's insane. That's justice. Her amber eyes burned with determination. Every person he's enslaved, every family he's destroyed, every life he's stolen. It's all in that machine. We fix the registrar. We free them all. Daniel ran a hand through his hair. Even if we could access it, the registrar is probably protected by military-grade security. We'd need inside help. Or, Salira said with a slight smile, we'd need to be invited in. Invited? Malkin's hosting a gala in 3 days. All the sector's elite will be there. Business leaders, government officials, even some military brass. It's where he does his real business, making deals and trading favors. And you know this how? Because I'm the entertainment. She gestured at herself bitterly. He's been advertising it for a week. The last free member of the infamous Meridian Squadron. Available for viewing. Not for sale, of course. He wants to keep me as a trophy. Daniel felt sick. He's displaying you like an animal. Exactly. But it also means I'll be there, inside his compound, with access to his systems. Under heavy guard. Unless I have an owner who insists on accompanying his property. Daniel stared at her. You want me to pretend to own you at Malkin's gala? You already do. For the next 20 hours. We just need to extend the rental and make it look legitimate. A successful businessman who wants to show off his new acquisition at the social event of the season. I'm a data clerk, nobody would believe. You're a veteran with commendations and a clean record. A few adjustments to your file. A suit that fits. And you'll look the part. The elite love a good military hero story. Daniel stood and paced to the window. The plan was insane. Walking into Malkin's compound was basically suicide. But if they could pull it off, if they could actually reset the registrar. How many people are we talking about? He asked. How many would be freed? At minimum 300. But if the pattern holds across all of Malkin's operations, it could be over 1,000. 1,000 people. Daniel thought about all the manifest he'd processed, all the suspicious cargo he'd flagged and ignored. How many of those containers had contained people? How many families had been torn apart while he sat in his office, following procedures that meant nothing? We'll need more than just the two of us, he said finally. I know. I have contacts. People who've been trying to help from the outside. But I needed someone on the inside first. Someone who could move freely. And after we reset the registrar, Malkin won't just let this go. No, Salira agreed. He'll come after us with everything he has. So we'd need an exit strategy. That freighter you found. We get the data to Nexus Prime. To people who can actually do something with it. Then we disappear. Salira looked away. I mean, you don't have to. Once this is done, you could what go back to my exciting life of data entry? Daniel shook his head. If we do this, we burn that bridge. Both of us. She met his eyes again. You're sure? No, but I'm tired of being sure. Sure is safe. Sure is boring. Sure is watching evil happen and doing nothing because it's not my problem. Thunder crashed overhead, shaking the building. The lights flickered but held. In that moment of near darkness, Daniel saw Salira's true exhaustion, the weight she'd been carrying alone for months. "You should sleep," he said. "Take the bed. I'll keep working on the logistics."
I couldn't.
"You can and you will. You're no good to your squadron dead on your feet." She stood reluctantly.
What about you?
"I've pulled longer watches. Besides," he gestured at the screen full of data, "someone needs to figure out how to turn a data clerk into a convincing member of high society in 3 days. Salira moved toward the bed, then paused.
Daniel. Yeah. Thank you. For listening. For... She struggled for words. For seeing me as a person.
"Thank you for reminding me I still am one." She lay down on the bed, still wearing his clothes, and was asleep within minutes. Daniel watched her for a moment. This strange, fierce woman who'd crashed into his carefully controlled life and offered him something he hadn't realized he'd been missing: a purpose. Then, he turned back to his screen and got to work. 3 days to infiltrate a gala, hack an AI, free 1,000 people, and escape the planet. He'd had worse odds. Outside, Taralis 4's endless rain continued to fall. But for the first time in 3 years, Daniel didn't mind. The storm was coming anyway. At least now he had a reason to weather it. The next morning arrived with the same gray light filtering through rain-streaked windows. Daniel had managed 3 hours of sleep on the floor, his back protesting every movement as he stood and stretched. Salira was already awake, standing by the window with a cup of the synthetic coffee he'd warned her about.
This is truly awful, she said without turning around.
"Told you, motor oil would be an improvement. Yet you drink it every day. Caffeine is caffeine. And after last night, I need all I can get." She turned to face him, and he was struck again by how different she looked from the desperate woman under the streetlight. Even in his oversized clothes, she carried herself with a pilot's precision, every movement economical and purposeful. "I've been thinking about your plan," Daniel said, pouring his own cup of the terrible coffee. "The gala infiltration. We're going to need more than just clothes and fake credentials."
Agreed, which is why we're going shopping today.
Shopping. Not for clothes. For allies. Salira set down her cup and pulled up a holographic display from his terminal. "I've been tracking the others from my squadron. 3 of them are still on Taralis 4. The display showed 3 faces, 2 humans and another hybrid, all wearing the distinctive flight suits of Meridian Squadron. "Marcus Torres," Salira pointed to the first face, a human male with graying temples. "My technical specialist. Could hack anything with a circuit board. Malkin has him working in a recycling plant in the industrial sector." "Kira Ashton," the second face, a young human woman with bright green eyes. "Best reconnaissance pilot I ever flew with. She is currently listed as a domestic servant in the residence district." "And Jorik," the last image, a Kalor human hybrid with more pronounced alien features than Salira. "Combat specialist and my second in command. He's entertainment at one of Malkin's clubs." Daniel studied the faces. "You know where they all are." "I know where they're supposed to be, but getting to them won't be easy. They're all tagged and monitored." "Tagged?" Salira pulled back her hair, revealing a small metallic disc at the base of her skull. "Subcutaneous tracker. Try to remove it without the proper codes. It triggers an alert. Go outside your designated area. Same thing. It's how Malkin keeps his property in line." "But you're here, outside your designated area." She smiled grimly. "The underground has signal dampeners. And your apartment building is old enough that the walls are lined with lead composite. It interferes with the signal. But the moment I step outside..."
"You light up like a beacon."
"Exactly." Daniel moved to his terminal and pulled up the city grid. "The recycling plant is in Sector 8. That's Malkin's territory. Heavy security. The residence district is better, but still patrolled. And the clubs."
"Are in the entertainment district where you found me."
We can't hit all 3 locations without being noticed.
No, Salira agreed. But we don't have to. Marcus is the key. If we can get him out, he can hack the others' trackers remotely.
Daniel traced a route on the map. The recycling plant processes shipments from the port. I have clearance to inspect cargo manifests there. It's thin, but it might get us in the door. It's a start, but we'll need a distraction, something to draw security away. I might have an idea about that. Daniel pulled up another screen. There's a shipment coming in today. Agricultural supplies, supposedly. But the manifest has the same discrepancies as dozens of others I've flagged. You think it's smuggled goods? Or people? Either way, if we report it to Port Authority right as we're entering the plant, security will rush to the docks, leaving the plant understaffed. Salira nodded appreciatively. You're better at this than you let on. I had good teachers. Some of them even survived. There was a bitterness in his voice that made Salira pause. Marble Canyon. What really happened there?
Daniel was quiet for a long moment. Command said we were peacekeepers. Said the colonists just needed to see a strong presence and they'd fall in line. They didn't mention the colonists were starving because the mining company had poisoned their water supply. They didn't mention we were there to protect the company, not the people.
What did you do? What I thought was right. Gave the colonists our medical supplies. Helped them evacuate to safe ground. Command called it theft of military resources and dereliction of duty. I called it being human. They court-martialed you. They offered me a choice. Quiet discharge or very public trial. I took the discharge.
Salira was quiet, then reached across the table and touched his hand briefly.
You saved lives. 43 people, and it cost me everything.
No, she said firmly.
It cost you a career built on lies. There's a difference.
Before Daniel could respond, a sharp knock at the door made them both freeze. Daniel moved silently to the security monitor, while Salira positioned herself behind the door, ready to strike. The monitor showed a single figure in the hallway. An older woman, human, wearing the gray uniform of building maintenance.
It's Mrs. Okonkwo, Daniel said, relaxing slightly.
She lives 2 floors down. He opened the door partway.
Mrs. Okonkwo, is everything okay?
The woman's weathered face was creased with worry. Daniel, there are security forces in the building. They're doing door-to-door searches.
Security, why?
Someone reported an unregistered hybrid in the area. They're checking every apartment. She glanced past him, and her eyes widened slightly as she spotted Salira. 2 minutes, maybe less. She hurried away without another word. Daniel closed the door and turned to Salira, who was already moving.
The window, she said. Fire escape. In this rain, you'll be spotted immediately. Better than being caught here. She grabbed the data chip from the table. Take this. If something happens to me,
nothing's going to happen. Daniel moved to his closet and pulled out a maintenance uniform he'd kept from a brief stint working building repairs. Put this on. Hood up. Keep your head down.
They'll scan me.
Not if you're with me. He grabbed his own work clothes and a toolkit. We're maintenance workers heading to fix a leak in the basement. Mrs. Okonkwo reported it yesterday. It's in the system. Salira changed quickly, while Daniel messed up his hair and rubbed grease on his face and hands. By the time the heavy footsteps reached their floor, they looked like 2 tired workers heading for another miserable shift. Daniel opened the door just as the security team arrived. 4 guards in black armor, faces hidden behind tactical visors. The leader held up a scanner.
Apartment inspection. Step aside. We've got a burst pipe in the basement, Daniel said, affecting a bored tone. Unless you want the whole building flooded.
I said step aside. Daniel shrugged and moved back, pulling Salira with him. The guards entered, scanners sweeping the small space. One of them paused at the table, noting the 2 cups.
You had company. My partner, Daniel gestured at Salira, who kept her head down, shoulders hunched. We were going over the work order when you knocked. The guard moved closer to Salira, scanner rising. Daniel's hand inched toward the heavy wrench in his toolkit, but before he could act, an alarm blared from the guard's communicators. Security breach at Dock 12, a voice crackled. All units respond immediately. The lead guard cursed. We're moving out, he pointed at Daniel. Don't leave the building until the all clear is given. They filed out quickly, boots thundering down the stairs. Daniel waited until the sounds faded, then let out a breath he didn't know he'd been holding. Dock 12, Salira said. That's where the suspicious shipment was coming in. Someone else must have reported it. Or someone wanted security pulled away from this building. She moved to the window, peering down at the street. We need to move. They'll be back. Daniel grabbed a bag and started throwing in essentials. My credentials won't mean anything now. They'll have flagged this apartment. Then we go underground. I know people who can help. They left through the service entrance, hoods up against the rain. The streets were chaos. Security vehicles racing toward the docks, civilians pressing against buildings to avoid being trampled. In the confusion, 2 maintenance workers splashing through puddles drew no attention. Salira led them through a maze of alleys, each one narrower and darker than the last. Finally, she stopped at what looked like a solid wall, but when she pressed a specific pattern of bricks, a section swung inward. The passage beyond was lit by bioluminescent strips, probably stolen from some decommissioned ship. The air was thick with moisture and the smell of rust. They descended metal stairs that clanged with each step, going deeper than Daniel had thought possible. The original colony tunnels, Salira explained, built before they realized the rain would never stop. Now it's where people go when they don't want to be found. They emerged into a larger chamber that had been converted into a makeshift living space. Dozens of people, all species, all looking like they'd fallen through the cracks of society. But their eyes were alert, watchful. Salira, a voice called out, and a young Rigellan hurried over. We heard about the search. Was it you? Partially. Tam. This is Daniel. Daniel. Tam runs this place. Tam extended a tentacle in greeting, which Daniel shook carefully. Any friend of Salira's is welcome here, though I should warn you, welcome doesn't mean safe. Nowhere's safe anymore, Daniel replied. True enough. Come, we have food, real food, not that synthetic paste they serve topside. They were led to a communal area where a pot of something that smelled remarkably like actual stew was bubbling over a heating element. Daniel realized he was starving. As they ate, Salira explained their plan to the gathered group. Many looked skeptical, but none dismissed it outright. The Registrar's core is in Malkin's compound, an older human said. Sub-level 3, behind military-grade shielding. You've been there, Daniel asked. I designed it. Back when it was supposed to be a legitimate government facility. The man's face was bitter. Before Malkin took over and perverted everything I built. Then you know its weaknesses, Salira said eagerly. I know its design. But Malkin's made modifications. Added layers of security I can only guess at. But the core structure is the same. Has to be. The Registrar is too complex to completely rebuild. He would have had to work within my original parameters. Daniel leaned forward. Could you draw us a map? Access points? Security nodes? Anything you remember? The man nodded slowly. I could, but it won't be enough. You'll need someone on the inside, someone who knows the current configuration. We're working on that, Salira said. We're going to extract Marcus Torres from the recycling plant. He can handle the technical side. Marcus is alive, another voice from the crowd, a woman with pilot's tattoos on her arms. I flew support for Meridian Squadron 2 years ago. We all thought. We're alive, Salira said firmly. Scattered and enslaved, but alive. And we're going to fix this. Tam waved a tentacle for attention. The recycling plant is a fortress. You'll need more than just a distraction to get in and out. What about the waste tunnels? Someone suggested. They connect to the plant's lower levels. Flooded this time of year, another countered. You'd drown before you got halfway. Daniel studied the rough map someone had sketched on a piece of scrap metal. What about during shift change? There must be a window when security is lighter. 15 minutes, the old designer said. Every 6 hours. 15 minutes when the old shift is leaving and the new one is arriving. But the surveillance system never sleeps. Unless it has a reason to, Salira said slowly. Daniel, that shipment at Dock 12. What if it wasn't random? What if someone wanted security pulled away? You think someone else is moving against Malkin? Or Malkin's testing his own security? Either way, it's an opportunity. A communication device on Tam's belt chimed. They listened for a moment. Then their skin patterns shifted to what Daniel recognized as alarm. Security's pulled back from the docks. They found nothing. Which means they'll expand the search, Daniel said. Focus on anywhere an unregistered hybrid might hide. Including here, Tam confirmed. We need to evacuate the vulnerable ones. The chamber erupted in controlled chaos as people began gathering essentials and helping those who couldn't move quickly on their own. Daniel and Salira joined in, helping an elderly Kalor couple pack their meager belongings. Where will they go? Daniel asked Tam. Deeper. There are levels even Malkin doesn't know about. Old mining shafts from before the colony was officially established. Why not just live there permanently? No food sources, no water except what seeps through. And that's toxic. It's survival, not living. As they worked, Salira pulled Daniel aside. We can't wait. Every hour we delay, Malkin tightens his grip. Agreed, but rushing in blind will just get us killed. Then, we don't go in blind. She turned to the old designer. Sir, I need everything you remember about the registrar. Every access code, every back door, every quirk in the system. The man laughed bitterly. Codes change, doors get sealed, but quirks, yes, there are quirks. Design flaws I never had time to fix. He pulled out an ancient datapad and began drawing diagrams, explaining as he went. The registrar was designed to be incorruptible. Every change it makes is logged in 3 separate locations. Malkin might have corrupted the main logs, but the backups still exist, hidden in the subsystems, dormant, but intact. If you could access them, you could prove every illegal modification he's made. Daniel studied the diagrams. This is more than just resetting the system. This is evidence of crimes going back years. Exactly. But the backups are encrypted with quantum keys. You'd need... The designer paused, eyes widening. You'd need the original initialization codes. Which are... The man pulled out a chain from under his shirt. On it hung a small crystal storage device. I kept them. Sentimental value. I told myself, but maybe I always knew this day would come. He removed the device and handed it to Salira. This won't get you past Malkin's security, but once you're in, once you reach the core, we can restore everything, Salira breathed. Every person he's erased, every life he's stolen. If you can get there, if you can survive long enough to use it. A whistle echoed through the tunnels, the signal that security was approaching. People moved faster, disappearing into passages Daniel hadn't even noticed. Go with them, Tam told Daniel and Salira. I'll delay security, buy you time. You can't. I can and I will. This is my territory, now go. They followed the crowd deeper into the tunnels, the lights growing dimmer with each level they descended. Finally, they emerged into a vast cavern, clearly artificial, but ancient. Mining equipment decades old sat rusting in corners. Welcome to the deep dark, someone said. Hope you're not claustrophobic. The space was larger than Daniel expected, but the ceiling was low enough that he had to duck in places. Somewhere. Water dripped steadily, the sound echoing off stone walls. Salira found a relatively dry spot and sat down, pulling out the crystal device the designer had given them. 3 pieces now. The evidence on Malkin, the backdoor codes, and a way into the compound. "The gala is still our best bet," Daniel said, sitting beside her. "But we'll need support. Your squadron members. Marcus first. Without him, we can't hack the trackers on the others." "The shift change is in..." Daniel checked his chronometer. 4 hours. If we're going to hit the recycling plant, that's our window. We'll need equipment, weapons, ideally. "I know someone," a voice said from the darkness. A figure stepped forward, and Daniel recognized one of the pilots from the communal area. "Name's Webb. I run supplies for the Resistance." "There's a Resistance?" Daniel asked. Webb laughed. "What do you call this? We've been fighting Malkin for years. Just small scale. Sabotage. Information gathering. Helping people escape. But what you're planning, that's the real deal."
"Can you help?"
"I can get you stunners. Maybe a plasma cutter for locks. Nothing military grade. That would raise flags."
"It'll have to do," Salira said. "What about transport?"
"Maintenance van," Daniel suggested. "They're everywhere. Nobody looks twice." "I can arrange that," Webb confirmed. "Give me 2 hours." As Webb disappeared into the tunnels, Daniel leaned back against the cold stone wall. "You know this is probably suicide." "Probably," Salira agreed. "But definitely suicide is doing nothing and letting Malkin win." "When you put it that way." She turned to him, her amber eyes catching what little light there was. "You can still walk away. This isn't your fight." "It wasn't. But then you showed up at my door with your terrible lies about one night." He met her gaze. "I spent 3 years pretending I didn't care. Turns out I'm a terrible liar." "Good thing I'm not." About which part, the one night or the rest?" She smiled, the first genuine smile he'd seen from her. "Wouldn't you like to know?" They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, listening to the drip of water and the distant murmur of voices. Then, Salira spoke again. "After we get Marcus, after we free the others, after we take down the registrar, what then? Honestly, I haven't thought that far ahead. I have, every night for 3 months. I've thought about it. What freedom would feel like. What it would mean to fly again. Not just in a ship, but in life. To make choices that matter. And I realized freedom alone isn't enough. It needs purpose, direction." She paused. Connection. Daniel felt something shift in the air between them, a possibility neither of them was ready to name. But before he could respond, Webb returned with 2 large cases. "Delivery service," he announced, setting them down. 2 stunners, 1 plasma cutter, surveillance scrambler with a 10-meter radius, and some toys that might come in handy. Daniel opened one case, examining the equipment. It was older tech, well used but maintained. "This'll work." Van's topside, hidden in Maintenance Depot 6. Key code is your birthday. Don't ask how I know. "My birthday." Webb grinned. "We've been watching you longer than you think. Daniel Rourke. The only honest clerk in Malkin's entire operation. You're practically a legend down here. I'm nobody special." "That's exactly what makes you special," Salira said quietly. Webb pulled out a communication device. "Emergency frequency. Things go bad. You call. We might not be able to save you, but we'll remember you." "Comforting," Daniel said dryly. "Best I can offer. Now, you've got 3 hours until shift change. I suggest you rest." But rest was impossible. Daniel's mind raced through the plan, finding holes, weaknesses, a dozen ways it could go wrong. Beside him, Salira was equally restless, checking and rechecking the equipment. "Tell me about Marcus," Daniel said finally. "What makes him so important?" "Beyond being brilliant," Salira considered. He sees patterns others miss, connections between disparate systems. He once hacked a Dominion battlecruiser using nothing but a maintenance terminal and some creative mathematics. And Malkin has him sorting recyclables. Waste of talent is Malkin's specialty. Take what makes people special and crush it. Not for much longer. No, Salira agreed. Not for much longer. 2 hours crawled by. Finally, they gathered their equipment and made their way back through the tunnels. The route to the surface was different, emerging in a drainage pipe that opened into an abandoned warehouse. The rain had intensified, turning the streets into rivers. Perfect cover for 2 people who didn't want to be seen. They found the maintenance van exactly where Webb had promised. Started with Daniel's birthday as the code. Subtle, Daniel muttered, climbing into the driver's seat. The recycling plant loomed ahead, a massive structure of pipes and conveyor belts, all feeding into a central processing unit that broke down materials at the molecular level. Steam rose from exhaust vents, mixing with the rain to create an oppressive fog. Daniel parked the van near a service entrance. According to their information, this door would be unmanned during shift change. They had 15 minutes. Ready? He asked Salira. 3 months of ready, she replied. They moved through the rain, the surveillance scrambler hopefully keeping them invisible to electronic eyes. The service door's lock yielded to the plasma cutter in seconds. Inside, the plant was a maze of machinery and noise. Conveyor belts carried endless streams of refuse, while massive mechanical arms sorted materials with inhuman precision. The smell was overwhelming, decay and chemicals mixing into something that made Daniel's eyes water. Worker quarters are this way, Salira said, consulting the rough map they'd been given. They moved quickly, but carefully, avoiding the few workers who hadn't left for shift change. Most looked as broken as the materials they processed, moving with the mechanical repetition of people who'd given up hope. The quarters were worse than Daniel had imagined. Rows of bunks stacked 4 high. No privacy, no personal space. A few figures lay on thin mattresses, either sleeping or too exhausted to move. "Marcus," Salira whispered urgently. "Marcus Torres." A figure in the corner bunk raised his head. Even in the dim light, Daniel could see the recognition in his eyes. "Commander, but you're dead. We're all dead." "Not yet," Salira said, helping him sit up. "We're getting you out." Marcus laughed bitterly. "Out there is no out. The tracker." "We'll deal with that. Can you walk?"
Yes. But the others?"
Daniel looked at the other workers, all watching now with a mixture of hope and fear. They couldn't take everyone. Not without transport. Not without a plan. "We'll come back," he said, hating himself for the lie even as he spoke it. "No," one of them said, an older woman with chemical burns on her arms. "Take Marcus. He's the only one who might be able to stop this." "Marie," Marcus started. "Go," she insisted. "Make it count." They helped Marcus to his feet. He was thinner than in the photos, muscles atrophied from months of menial labor, but his eyes were sharp. 2 minutes until shift change ends, Salira warned. They moved faster now, Marcus leaning heavily on Daniel. They'd made it halfway to the exit when alarms began blaring. "So much for 15 minutes, Daniel muttered. Security forces poured into the plant, stunning weapons drawn. Daniel pushed Marcus and Salira behind a massive recycling unit and returned fire, the stunner in his hand feeling familiar despite the years. "We're pinned," Salira said. "Not for long." Marcus pulled an interface cable from the recycling unit and somehow connected it to his tracker. "Give me 30 seconds. "We don't have 30 seconds. "Then make them." Daniel and Salira laid down covering fire while Marcus worked. His fingers flew over an improvised interface he'd created from spare parts, code streaming across a cracked display. "Got it," he announced. Every machine in the plant suddenly roared to life at maximum capacity. Conveyor belts accelerated, Sorting arms swung wildly, and the central processor began an emergency purge cycle. The security forces scattered as tons of recyclable material flew through the air. "Move!" Daniel shouted. They ran through the chaos, Marcus somehow keeping pace despite his condition. The exit was just ahead when a figure stepped out of the shadows. Governor Malkin himself, flanked by 2 bodyguards in power armor. "Salira," he said, his voice carrying despite the mechanical mayhem. "I'm disappointed. I had such plans for you." "Sorry to inconvenience you," she replied, stunner raised. Malkin smiled. "Did you really think I wouldn't know every move you've made? Every person you've talked to? I own this world." "Not for long. No, look around. You're trapped in my facility, surrounded by my forces. Your little rebellion ends here." Daniel felt the weight of the plasma cutter in his pocket. 1 shot, maybe 2 before the bodyguards reacted. Not enough. Then Marcus laughed. "Something funny," Malkin demanded. "You," Marcus said, "thinking you're in control. You never were very good with technology. Were you?" The lights in the plant suddenly cut out. Emergency lighting kicked in a second later, bathing everything in red. And in that moment of darkness, Daniel heard a sound that made his blood run cold. The central processor had reversed its function. Instead of breaking down materials, it was building something. And from the mechanical sounds, something large. "What did you do?" Malkin snarled. "Gave the plant's AI a new directive," Marcus said simply. "Protect workers from hostile management." The thing that emerged from the processor was a nightmare of recycled parts. Twisted metal and plastic formed into something vaguely humanoid, but utterly wrong. It moved with jerky precision toward Malkin and his guards. "Run," Daniel said. They didn't need to be told twice. They burst out of the recycling plant into the rain, the sounds of destruction echoing behind them. The maintenance van was still where they'd left it, and Daniel gunned the engine before the doors were fully closed. Through the rear window, they could see the plant's main entrance explode outward as the recycled monstrosity Marcus had created pursued Malkin's forces. "That won't hold them long," Marcus said, slumped in the back seat. "Maybe 20 minutes before they shut down the AI." "20 minutes is all we need," Salira replied, already working on his tracker with tools from Webb's kit. "Daniel, head for the old transport depot. We need somewhere secure to work." Daniel took a hard turn, tires screaming on wet pavement. Security vehicles were converging on the plant, but none paid attention to a maintenance van heading away from the chaos. Just another service vehicle fleeing the scene. The old transport depot had been abandoned when the new spaceport was built closer to the city center. Now, it was a graveyard of rusted shuttles and broken dreams. Daniel pulled the van into a hangar that still had most of its roof. "How bad is the tracker?" he asked, watching Salira work. "Sophisticated," she admitted. But Marcus was right. He partially severed the connection. "I just need to complete the job without triggering the explosive charge." "Explosive!" Daniel's voice rose slightly. "Small one," Marcus said weakly. "Just enough to ensure the property doesn't run away. Malkin's little insurance policy." Salira's hands were steady as she worked, using the plasma cutter at its lowest setting to carefully separate the tracker's components. "There. The explosive is isolated. Now, for the transmitter." She made 2 more precise cuts, then gently pulled the device free. Marcus winced, but didn't cry out. The wound was small but deep, already showing signs of infection from months of poor conditions. "We need medical supplies," Daniel said. "Later. First, we free the others." Marcus was already connecting his salvaged interface to the tracker. "I can reverse engineer the signal, create a virus that will cascade through the network. Every tracker running on the same frequency will shut down simultaneously." "All of them?" Salira asked hopefully. "Within a 50-kilometer radius. That should cover the entire city." Daniel kept watch while Marcus worked, his fingers flying over the improvised keyboard despite his exhaustion. Code scrolled across the cracked screen faster than Daniel could follow. "There," Marcus said finally. "Ready to transmit. But the moment I send this, Malkin will know exactly where we are. Then we'd better be ready to move." Salira pulled out the communication device Webb had given them. "This is Salira. We need an extraction. Old transport depot, Hangar 6. "Copy that." Webb's voice crackled back. 10 minutes. Be ready to run." Marcus initiated the transmission. For a moment, nothing happened. Then his screen lit up with cascading confirmations. One by one, tracker signals across the city went dark. "It's working," he breathed. "They're all going offline." Salira closed her eyes, tears running down her face. "They're free. All of them." "Free to run," Daniel corrected. "Malkin won't let this stand. Every security force in the city will be mobilized." "Let them come," Marcus said with grim satisfaction. "I've got their entire network mapped now. Security protocols, communication channels, even Malkin's private files, including the gala. Especially the gala." Marcus pulled up a schematic. Full guest list, security positions, and, "Hello. What's this?" He enlarged a section of code. "There's a sealed section of the compound, completely isolated from the rest of the network. No access logs, no surveillance. It's like it doesn't exist." "The Registrar's Corps," Salira said. "Has to be." "But why hide it so completely?" Daniel wondered. "Even from his own security." Before anyone could answer, vehicles roared into the depot. Daniel raised his stunner, but Salira put a hand on his arm. "It's Webb." 3 modified cargo haulers pulled up, back doors already open. Webb jumped out of the lead vehicle. "We've got about 30 seconds before this place is swarming. Move." They helped Marcus into one of the haulers, where Daniel was surprised to see Kira and Jorik. The other members of Meridian Squadron Salira had shown him. "Commander," Kira said, her green eyes bright with tears. "We thought you were dead." "Not yet," Salira replied, embracing them both. "But we're not safe either. Webb, where are we going?" "Underground first. Then we split up. The gala is tomorrow night. We need to get you cleaned up and credentialed if you're really going through with this insane plan." The haulers split up as they left the depot, each taking a different route. Through the rear window, Daniel could see security vehicles converging on the hangar they'd just left. Their hauler dove into a tunnel that led back to the underground network, but a different section than before. This area was more organized, with actual lighting and what looked like a command center. "Welcome to the real resistance," Webb said. "We've been building this for 2 years, waiting for the right moment." "And you think this is it?" Daniel asked. "I think you've already done more damage to Malkin in 1 day than we've managed in 2 years. So yes, this is it." The command center was impressive for an underground operation. Multiple screens showed surveillance feeds from across the city. Communication intercepts scrolled past, and a large tactical map dominated one wall. "Malkin's mobilized everything," someone reported. "Checkpoints on all major routes, door-to-door searches in suspected areas." "But no trackers," Marcus added with satisfaction. "They're flying blind." "Not for long," Webb warned. "He'll have new ones manufactured within days." "We don't need days," Salira said. "Just tomorrow night." Tam appeared from another tunnel, their tentacles waving in agitation. "The freed workers are flooding in. Hundreds of them. We don't have resources for this many people." "We'll manage," Webb said. "Get them to the deep shelters. Ration what we have." "For how long if your plan fails?" "Then we're no worse off than before," Salira interrupted. "But if it succeeds, they'll all have their lives back." Daniel studied the tactical map. "The gala is at Malkin's compound, North Sector. Heavy security, limited access points, even with credentials. Getting in will be difficult." "Actually," a new voice said, "it might be easier than you think." They turned to see the old designer from before, but now he was clean-shaven and wearing an expensive suit. "Dr. Harrison Caldwell," he said with a slight bow. "I believe I forgot to properly introduce myself earlier." "Dr. Caldwell designed the original registrar system," Webb explained. "And he's still on the guest list for every major governmental function." "Malkin likes to show me off," Caldwell said bitterly. "The brilliant mind he's corrupted. I'm his trophy as much as you were meant to be. Salira." "You're going to the gala?" Daniel asked. "Every year. And this year, I'm allowed a +1. My new assistant. Shall we say, someone to help me with my advanced age." "That could work," Salira mused. "But what about me? Malkin knows I'm free now." "Actually, that's perfect," Marcus said, looking up from his screen. "He's already announced it. The dangerous hybrid who killed 3 guards escaping custody. He's doubled the security for the gala specifically because of you." "How does that help us?" "Because he's expecting you to attack from outside. The last thing he'll expect is for you to walk in the front door." "As what I can't exactly hide what I am," Kira spoke up. "Actually, you can. I've been working in the residence district. Remember, I've seen how the elite disguise their hybrid servants. Holographic modifiers, appearance scramblers. Make you look fully human, or fully Kalor, depending on the setting." "We have that technology?" Daniel asked. "Stolen it weeks ago," Webb confirmed. "Been waiting for the right use." They spent the next several hours preparing. Caldwell coached Daniel on acting like an assistant, teaching him the proper etiquette and responses. Kira worked with Salira on the disguise technology, adjusting settings until she looked like a completely different person. Marcus and Jorik focused on the technical aspects, creating bypass codes and emergency protocols. "The moment you're inside, you'll have maybe an hour before someone realizes the credentials are modified," Marcus warned. "You need to find the registrar's core, upload the reset protocol, and get out." "What about the sealed section?" Daniel asked. "The one that doesn't exist." "I've been thinking about that," Caldwell said. "When I designed the registrar, I included a physical failsafe, a manual reset that could only be activated on site. If Malkin found it, he'd seal it off completely," Salira finished. "Keep anyone from using it against him. But he couldn't remove it, too integral to the system. So it's still there, waiting." Daniel looked at the crystal device Caldwell had given them. "And this will activate it. If you can get to it. If you can survive long enough to use it." The next day passed in a blur of preparation. Daniel was fitted with a formal suit that made him look like he belonged in Malkin's world. Salira's disguise was perfected, turning her into an unremarkable human woman with brown hair and plain features. The transformation was so complete that Daniel had to look twice to recognize her. "How do I look?" she asked, turning in a slow circle. "Invisible," he said. "Perfect for a servant. And you look like you've never held a weapon in your life. Perfect for an assistant." They shared a moment of dark humor, both knowing how thin their disguises really were. As evening approached, a luxury transport arrived at one of the underground's hidden exits. Caldwell was already inside, looking every inch the distinguished scientist. "Ready?" he asked. Daniel and Salira climbed in, their disguises complete, weapons hidden in shielded compartments that should pass standard scans. The transport rose smoothly and joined the stream of vehicles heading for Malkin's compound. The compound was a testament to excess. Towering walls of polished black stone, gardens that somehow thrived despite the constant rain, and a main building that looked more like a palace than a government facility. Security was visible everywhere, guards in formal uniforms that didn't quite hide the weapons underneath. Their transport joined a queue of similar vehicles, each disgorging elegantly dressed guests. Daniel saw politicians, business leaders, even a few military officers he recognized from his service days, all here to pay homage to Malkin's power. "Credentials," a guard said when they reached the checkpoint. Caldwell handed over their documents with practiced ease. Dr. Harrison Caldwell and assistants. The guard scanned them, and Daniel held his breath. Marcus's modifications held. The guard handed them back with a nod. Enjoy the evening, Doctor. They walked through the main entrance into a grand foyer that belonged in a core world museum, not a frontier planet. Crystal chandeliers cast rainbow patterns on marble floors, and the walls were lined with art that had probably cost more than most people made in a lifetime. Ostentatious, Caldwell muttered. He always did have terrible taste. Guests mingled in the main ballroom, drinks in hand, fake smiles plastered on their faces. Daniel spotted Malkin at the center of it all, holding court like a king. He looked none the worse for the previous day's encounter, though Daniel noticed his bodyguards stayed very close. We need to find the access point, Celira whispered. Third floor, Caldwell said quietly. My original designs put the maintenance access there. If the sealed section exists, that's where we'll find it. They moved through the crowd, Caldwell stopping occasionally to exchange pleasantries with other guests. Daniel and Celira stayed silent, playing their roles as invisible assistants. They had just reached the stairs when a hand fell on Daniel's shoulder. Well, Daniel Rourke. Daniel turned to find Commander Reynolds, his old commanding officer from Kellis Prime. The man had gained weight and rank in the years since, his uniform now bearing Admiral's insignia. Admiral, Daniel said carefully, I didn't expect to see you here. Nor I you. Last I heard, you were rotting in some clerical position, and now you're working for Caldwell. Recent appointment, Caldwell interjected smoothly. Daniel's military background is useful for security assessments. Reynolds' eyes narrowed. Security assessments? At a social gathering? One can never be too careful, Caldwell replied. As I'm sure you'd agree, given recent events. The hybrid terrorist, Reynolds nodded. Nasty business, though I heard she had help. Someone with military training. Daniel kept his expression neutral, despite his racing heart. Concerning if true. Indeed. Reynolds' gaze shifted to Celira. And who's this? My personal secretary, Caldwell said. She doesn't speak much. Throat injury from a childhood accident. Celira nodded silently, keeping her eyes downcast. Reynolds studied her for a moment longer, then shrugged. Well, enjoy the party, though I doubt it's your scene. Rourke. Not enough mud and blood. He walked away, laughing at his own joke. Daniel released a breath he didn't know he'd been holding. We need to move, Caldwell said. That won't be the last person to recognize you. They climbed to the third floor, which was notably less crowded. A few couples seeking privacy, a server or two, but otherwise empty. Caldwell led them down a hallway lined with offices, all dark and locked. Here, he said, stopping at what looked like a blank section of wall. If I'm right. He pressed a specific pattern on the wall, similar to what Celira had done at the underground entrance. Nothing happened. They must have changed it, Daniel said. No, Celira said suddenly. Listen. They fell silent. There was a slight hum, barely audible, coming from behind the wall. The registrar, Caldwell breathed. It's here. Marcus's voice crackled through their hidden earpieces. I'm reading massive energy signatures from your location. You're right on top of it. But how do we get in? Daniel asked. Celira pulled out a small device from her disguise toolkit. When in doubt, make your own door. The plasma cutter at its highest setting began eating through the wall. The noise was significant, but the party below was loud enough to cover it. Still, they didn't have much time. The wall gave way, revealing a narrow passage that hadn't been on any blueprint. It was older than the rest of the building, probably part of the original colonial structure. This is it, Caldwell said. This is my original access tunnel. They entered single file. The passage so narrow their shoulders brushed the walls. Emergency lighting flickered on as they moved, casting eerie shadows. The hum grew louder with each step. The passage opened into a circular chamber, dominated by a massive cylindrical structure that pulsed with blue light. The registrar's core? It was beautiful and terrible. A crystalline matrix containing the digital lives of millions. "My God," Caldwell whispered. "What has he done to it?" The core was wrapped in additional hardware, modifications that looked like parasites, feeding on the original structure. Black cables ran from these additions into the floor, spreading Malkin's corruption throughout the system. "Can we remove them?" Daniel asked. "Not without killing the core," Caldwell said. "He's made them integral." But the manual reset. He moved around the core, searching. There, a small panel, almost invisible unless you knew where to look. Caldwell pressed his hand against it, and it opened to reveal a crystal slot exactly the size of the device they carried. "This is too easy," Celira said suddenly. "Where's the security?" As if in answer to her question, the main door to the chamber burst open. Malkin stood there with a squad of guards, all weapons drawn. "Did you really think I wouldn't know?" he said, his voice echoing in the chamber. "Every move you've made, every plan you've hatched, I've been 3 steps ahead." "Then why let us get this far?" Daniel asked, subtly moving to put himself between Malkin and the core. "Because I wanted to see who would dare. And now I know. The failed soldier, the escaped slave, and the bitter old man who started all this." Malkin stepped forward. "You've given me everything I need. All the resistance leaders in one place." "Not all," Celira said. The lights throughout the compound suddenly cut out. Emergency power kicked in a second later. But in that moment of darkness, Daniel heard the distinctive sound of transport engines. Many of them. Marcus's voice came through their earpieces. "Now!" The compound shook as something massive hit the outer wall. Through the chamber's single window, Daniel could see modified cargo haulers ramming through the gates. Freed workers poured out. No longer property, but people fighting for their future. "The party's over," Celira said, dropping her disguise with a touch of a button. Her hybrid features blazed with defiance. Malkin's face contorted with rage. "Kill them all!" The chamber erupted in chaos. Daniel tackled Caldwell behind the core as energy beams seared the air above them. Celira moved like the fighter she was, taking down 2 guards before they could react. "The reset," Caldwell shouted, pressing the crystal into Daniel's hand. "You have to complete it." Daniel rolled out from behind cover, firing his concealed stunner to clear a path. The crystal slot was just meters away, but it might as well have been kilometers with the crossfire. Then, Jorik and Kira burst through the damaged wall, weapons blazing. "Meridian Squadron," Kira shouted. "Remember us!" The guards hesitated, recognizing the legendary pilots they'd been told were dead. That hesitation cost them. Jorik's stun blast took down 3, while Kira covered Daniel's approach to the panel. Daniel slammed the crystal home and turned it. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the core began to pulse faster, its blue light shifting to white. "No." Malkin pulled out a military-grade plasma rifle, aiming at the core. "I'll destroy it all rather than lose control." Celira hit him from the side, both of them crashing into the wall. They fought viciously. Malkin's enhanced strength against Celira's training. Daniel moved to help, but more guards were pouring in. The core's pulse reached a crescendo, and suddenly every screen in the chamber came alive. Names scrolled past, thousands of them, as the registrar restored every erased identity, every stolen life. "It's working!" Caldwell shouted. Malkin threw Celira off and raised his rifle again. But Daniel was there, grabbing the weapon. They struggled for control, the rifle swinging wildly. "You're nobody," Malkin snarled. "A failed soldier, a worthless clerk." "Maybe," Daniel said, driving his knee into Malkin's stomach. "But I'm nobody who's stopping you." The rifle went off, the plasma beam shooting upward and bringing down part of the ceiling. Debris rained down, and in the confusion, Daniel saw Celira moving toward them. "Duck!" she yelled. Daniel dropped as she swung a piece of fallen conduit, catching Malkin across the head. He went down hard and didn't get up. "Is he?" Daniel asked. "Alive, unfortunately, but he'll live to stand trial." The core's restoration was nearly complete. Throughout the compound, throughout the city, people were discovering they existed again. They had names, histories, rights. "We need to go," Kira warned. "Security forces are still coming." They fled through the hole they'd created, joining the stream of freed workers and resistance fighters evacuating the compound. The rain had stopped for the first time since Daniel had arrived on Taralis 4, and stars were visible through gaps in the clouds. Emergency vehicles were already arriving, but not to arrest them. Webb had done his job well, ensuring the media and legitimate authorities knew exactly what had happened. The evidence from Malkin's own systems was being broadcast across the sector. "The freighter," Daniel said suddenly. "We still need to get the data off planet." "Already done," Marcus said, appearing beside them with a satisfied grin. "Uploaded everything to a dozen different ships while you were inside. By tomorrow, everyone from here to the core worlds will know what Malkin did." They reached the extraction point where modified haulers waited. As they climbed in, Daniel looked back at the compound. Smoke rose from several fires, and the magnificent building looked a lot less impressive with holes in its walls. "So what now?" he asked Celira. She was quiet for a moment, then smiled. "Now we disappear. At least for a while. There are other Malkins out there, other registrars being abused. Well, I did rent you for one night, but I think I might need an extension." "How long were you thinking?" She met his eyes, and he saw warmth there along with the determination. "How does a lifetime sound, partner?" Daniel thought about his empty apartment, his predictable life, all the years he'd spent hiding from who he really was. "Sounds like a better deal than I deserve." "Maybe, but it's the one you're getting." As the hauler pulled away, heading for the spaceport and the freighter that would take them off Taralis 4, Daniel realized the rain had truly stopped. For the first time in 3 years, he could see the sky clearly. It was beautiful. The freighter's cargo hold was packed with refugees, all clutching the few possessions they'd managed to grab before fleeing. Daniel moved through them, checking on injuries and distributing what medical supplies they had. These were the people who couldn't stay on Taralis 4, whose association with the Resistance made them targets for whatever came next. "How many?" Celira asked, joining him near the medical station they'd improvised. 43 so far, with more coming. Webb's people are screening them at the dock." She handed him a manifest pad. "The captain needs a final count in 10 minutes. We launch in 15, ready or not." Through the hold's viewport, Daniel could see the spaceport in chaos. News of Malkin's arrest had spread like wildfire, and half the city seemed to be trying to leave while the other half celebrated in the streets. The rain had started again, lighter than before, almost gentle. "You should see this," Marcus called from a terminal he'd commandeered. "The feeds from the core worlds are already coming in." They gathered around the screen. A news anchor from Nexus Prime was discussing the shocking revelations from Taralis 4, while a scroll of names ran along the bottom, every person the registrar had illegally erased, now restored. "The Senate is calling for a full investigation," the anchor continued. "Questions are being raised about how such corruption could have gone unnoticed for so long." "Unnoticed," Jorek spat. "They knew. They all knew." "Maybe," Celira said. "But now they can't pretend otherwise." A commotion at the cargo bay entrance drew their attention. Webb appeared, supporting a figure Daniel didn't recognize at first. Then he saw the chemical burns on her arms. "Marie," Marcus breathed, rushing forward. "You made it out." The woman from the recycling plant smiled weakly. "Your virus worked perfectly. The moment our trackers died, we ran. Most of us made it to the underground. And the others..." Her smile faded. "Some were too broken to run. Some chose to stay and fight. They held the security forces back while the rest escaped." Daniel felt the weight of those losses, even in victory. How many hadn't made it this far? 5 minutes, the captain's voice echoed through the hold. More people streamed in, including Dr. Caldwell, who looked older than ever, but had a light in his eyes Daniel hadn't seen before. "I'm staying," he announced before anyone could ask. "Someone needs to rebuild the registrar properly. Make sure this never happens again." "It's dangerous," Salira warned. "Malkin has allies, people who profited from his system. Then they'll have to deal with me. And with this," he held up a data pad. "Every backdoor, every vulnerability in the system. I'm going to close them all." Daniel shook the old man's hand. "Thank you for everything. Thank me by making sure that data reaches the right people. The Senate, the military command, the media. Everyone needs to know what happened here." The launch warning sounded. Those staying on Taralis 4 hurried off the ship while the refugees found whatever space they could. Daniel and Salira made their way to the passenger section, where Meridian Squadron had claimed a corner. "Just like old times," Kira said, trying to lighten the mood. "Except instead of a military transport, we're on a freight hauler that smells like synthetic protein. And instead of a mission, we're running for our lives," Jorik added. "We're not running," Salira corrected. "We're advancing to a better position." The ship shuddered as the engines engaged. Through the viewport, Daniel watched Taralis 4 fall away. The planet looked different from above, the constant cloud cover breaking up to reveal patches of actual ground beneath. Maybe the weather was finally changing. Maybe everything was. "So," Marcus said, pulling out a bottle of something that definitely wasn't regulation. "What's the plan? We can't all show up on Nexus Prime without credentials." "We won't all be going to Nexus Prime," Salira said. She activated a holo display showing star charts. "The evidence is already spreading, but it needs shepherds, people to make sure it reaches the right hands, doesn't get buried or dismissed." She highlighted several systems. "Jorik, you and Marcus head to Kellis Prime. There's a senator there who's been investigating illegal labor practices. Kira, you take a team to the military command on Fortress Station. They need to know how many other squadrons might have been disappeared." "And you?" Kira asked. Salira glanced at Daniel. "We're going to Earth." "Earth." Marcus nearly choked on his drink. "The homeworld, that's core system territory. Security will be insane. Which is why it's perfect. The Senate is convening an emergency session about the frontier territories. Someone needs to testify. And who better than the last free commander of Meridian Squadron?" "It's suicide," Jorik said flatly. "You'll be arrested the moment you land." "No," Daniel said, understanding. "She'll be protected. A witness in a case this big. With this much media attention, they won't dare touch her. Besides," Salira added with a slight smile, "I have a military advisor with connections." Daniel laughed. "Former military. Very former. And my connections all think I'm a traitor." "Admiral Reynolds doesn't. I saw how he looked at you at the gala. Suspicious, yes, but also respectful. He knows what really happened at Marble Canyon. Even if that's true, Earth is 6 weeks away. A lot can happen in 6 weeks. Then we'd better make sure we're ready for it." The first week passed in preparation. They divided the evidence, created multiple copies, established communication protocols. The freighter made stops at 3 different stations, dropping off groups heading to different destinations. Each farewell was difficult, not knowing if they'd see each other again. By the second week, only Daniel and Salira remained of their original group, along with a handful of refugees bound for the core systems. The ship felt empty, too quiet after the chaos of their escape. Daniel found Salira one night in the observation lounge, staring out at the stars streaming past in hyperspace. "Can't sleep?" he asked, sitting beside her. "I keep thinking about what you asked me. That first night. Why I picked you out of the crowd. You said it was because I saw you as a person." "That was true. But not the whole truth." She turned to face him. I'd been watching you for 2 weeks. Remember? I saw you flag those suspicious shipments. Saw you refuse bribes. But more than that, I saw you help people. Small things. Carrying supplies for that old Rigellan vendor. Sharing your lunch with the homeless veterans by the port.
Anyone would have done that. No, they wouldn't. And that's the point. You were the only one who did. She paused. I chose you because you were already fighting Malkin's system, even if you didn't realize it. Every small act of kindness was a rebellion against what he'd built. Daniel thought about that. All those small gestures he'd made without thinking, just because it seemed right. I wasn't trying to be a hero. That's what made you one. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the stars. Then Celira spoke again. What will you do after Earth, after the testimony? I hadn't thought that far ahead. I want to fly again. Not military, but maybe cargo runs to the frontier colonies, helping people who need it. She hesitated. I was thinking I might need a co-pilot. Someone with experience in logistics and combat. Someone I trust. Someone who sees me as more than just a hybrid or a pilot or a symbol. Daniel reached over and took her hand. I know someone who might be interested. She squeezed his fingers. Good. Because I already told the captain we'd need a 2-person cabin for the rest of the journey. Presumptuous. Practical. We need to coordinate our testimony. Is that what we're calling it? She laughed, and Daniel realized how much he'd come to love that sound. It had been so rare at first, but now came more easily, like she was remembering how to be happy. The third week brought complications. They'd stopped at Meridian Station for supplies when security forces boarded the ship. Daniel and Celira watched from their cabin's monitor as officers questioned the captain. They're looking for us, Celira said. No, they're looking for escaped property from Taralis 4. We're legal citizens again, remember? But the officers were thorough, checking every cabin. When they reached theirs, Daniel opened the door before they could knock. Can I help you? The lead officer consulted his pad. We're looking for any undocumented passengers from the Taralis 4 incident. Incident. Celira appeared beside Daniel. Is that what they're calling it now? The officer's eyes widened as he recognized her. Commander Celira Butt. You're supposed to be dead. I got better, and it's just Celira now. I resigned my commission the day my squadron was betrayed. There's a bulletin. You're wanted for questioning. Good. I have a lot of answers to give, but not here, and not to you. I'm testifying before the Earth Senate in 3 weeks. If anyone wants to question me, they can do it there, publicly, on the record. The officer looked uncertain. His partner whispered urgently in his ear, probably about jurisdiction and the media attention this would bring. We'll need to verify your identity, the officer finally said. Please do. Celira held out her arm for a DNA scan. You'll find I'm exactly who I say I am. A legal citizen whose identity was stolen and has now been restored. Unless you have a warrant, a real warrant, not some corporate bounty, I'll be continuing to Earth. The scan confirmed her identity. The officers left, but Daniel knew word would spread. By the time they reached Earth, everyone would know they were coming. That was risky, he said. It was necessary. I'm done hiding, done pretending to be less than I am. The fourth week, they received a message from Marcus. He and Jorik had reached Kellis Prime and made contact with the senator. The investigation was moving forward, with dozens of other cases being uncovered. It's bigger than we thought. Marcus's recorded message said, Malkin wasn't the only one. There's a whole network, spread across the frontier. They're calling it the registry scandal. You've started something that can't be stopped. Kira's message came the next day. The military was conducting its own investigation, with several high-ranking officers already under arrest for their involvement. Meridian Squadron is being posthumously honored, she said, tears in her voice. All of us. They're calling us heroes. I just wish the others could see it.
Daniel found Salira crying after that message, holding a small hollow of her squadron in better days. "They deserved better," she said. "They did, but their sacrifice means others won't suffer the same fate." "Is that enough? It has to be." The fifth week brought them to the Sol system's outer markers. Earth itself was still days away, but already they could feel the change. Security was tighter, communications more formal. This was the heart of human civilization, where decisions were made that affected billions. The captain called them to the bridge as they approached the checkpoint. "There's a naval escort waiting," he said, pointing to the tactical display. "3 cruisers. They say they're here to ensure your safe arrival." "Or to make sure we don't run," Salira muttered. The lead cruiser hailed them. Daniel's heart sank as Admiral Reynolds appeared on the screen. "Commander Salira, Mr. Rourke, I'm here to escort you to Earth." "Admiral," Daniel said carefully, "this is unexpected. A lot of things have been unexpected lately, including discovering that one of my best soldiers has been working as a clerk on a backwater planet for 3 years. Former soldier. We'll see about that. Prepare to transfer to my ship. The freighter can continue to Earth, but you two are now under military protection." "Are we under arrest?" Salira asked. "You're under protection," Reynolds repeated. "There are people who don't want your testimony to reach the Senate. I'm here to make sure it does." The transfer was smooth, but tense. The cruiser's crew watched them with a mixture of curiosity and suspicion. Reynolds met them personally in the docking bay. "Commander," he said to Salira, then turned to Daniel. "Sergeant." "I'm not a sergeant anymore. You never stopped being one. You just stopped wearing the uniform." Reynolds gestured for them to follow. "We need to talk." His office was exactly as Daniel remembered from the old days, sparse, functional, with only a few personal touches. A photo of Reynolds with his family, a ceremonial sword from his first command, and surprisingly, a framed commendation with Daniel's name on it. "You kept that?" Daniel asked. "Of course I did. You saved 43 civilians at Marble Canyon. The fact that Command didn't see it that way doesn't diminish the achievement." "You knew." "I've always known. Just like I knew Meridian Squadron didn't go rogue. But knowing and proving are different things. Until now." Reynolds activated a holo display showing the data they'd released. "This changes everything. The entire frontier governance system is under review. Hundreds of officials are being investigated. And at the center of it all, 2 people who refuse to let injustice stand." "We had help," Salira said. "A lot of people risked everything. And they'll be recognized. But right now, the Senate needs to hear from you. Both of you. Your testimony could reshape how the frontier is governed." "Or it could get us killed," Daniel said. "Not on my watch. I've been assigned as your security detail. Full military protection until after the hearings." "Why?" Salira asked. "Why do you care?" Reynolds was quiet for a moment. "Because I've spent my career sending good people to die for bad reasons. Marble Canyon was just one example. Maybe this is my chance to balance the scales." The final approach to Earth was surreal. Daniel had never been to the homeworld, had only seen it in pictures. The blue marble hanging in space, surrounded by orbital platforms and defense stations, was both beautiful and intimidating. They docked at Geneva Station, where the Senate convened. The media was waiting, hundreds of reporters and cameras capturing their arrival. Salira walked with her head high, Daniel beside her, Reynolds and his security detail forming a protective cordon. "Commander Salira," reporters shouted. "Is it true Governor Malkin enslaved hundreds of people? Will you be pressing charges? What happened to the rest of Meridian Squadron?" Salira stopped at the entrance to the Senate building. She turned to face the cameras, and Daniel saw her transform into the commander she'd once been. "Tomorrow, I will testify before the Senate about what happened on Taralis 4 and across the frontier. I will speak for those who can't, for those who were silenced, for those who were erased. The truth will be heard." "What about you, Mr. Rourke?" a reporter called. Why did you get involved? Daniel thought about the question. Because someone had to. Because standing by while injustice happens makes you complicit. Because sometimes one person saying no is enough to start a revolution. Inside, they were shown to quarters that were luxurious compared to what they'd grown used to. Real beds, real food, even a window overlooking Earth's Pacific Ocean. It's beautiful, Salira said, staring at the view. It's home, Daniel said, then corrected himself. For humans, anyway. My home was my squadron, then Taralis 4's underground. Now, she looked at him. Now I'm not sure. Home is where you choose to make your stand, Daniel said. Where you choose to build something better. Then I guess we're home. That night, as they prepared for the testimony, Daniel found himself thinking about how much had changed. 6 weeks ago, he'd been a clerk processing shipping manifests, pretending not to see the corruption around him. Now he was about to testify before the Earth Senate about one of the largest human rights violations in frontier history. Scared, Salira asked, lying beside him. Terrified. You? Same, but also ready. This is what we survived for, what the others died for. We're going to change things. We already have. Tomorrow just makes it official. The Senate chamber was packed the next morning. Hundreds of senators from across human space, representatives from alien governments, media from every major network. Daniel had never seen anything like it. Salira testified first. She spoke for 3 hours, detailing everything from Meridian Squadron's betrayal to the systematic enslavement of frontier citizens. She named names, provided evidence, and never once wavered despite aggressive questioning from senators with ties to frontier corporations. When Daniel's turn came, he focused on the system that had allowed it to happen. The willful blindness, the bureaucratic indifference, the small corruptions that enabled the larger ones. Every day, I processed manifests I knew were fraudulent, he said. Every day, I followed procedures that meant nothing. I told myself I was just one person, that I couldn't change anything. I was wrong. We all have the power to resist injustice, even in small ways, and small resistances can become revolutions. You're saying everyone is responsible, a senator challenged. I'm saying everyone has a choice, to speak up or stay silent, to act or to allow. I stayed silent for 3 years. I regret every day of it. Yet you eventually acted. What changed? Daniel looked at Salira. I met someone who reminded me that being human means more than just surviving. It means standing for something, even when it costs everything. The questioning went on for hours. Some senators were supportive, others hostile, but all were engaged. This wasn't just about Taralis 4 anymore. It was about the entire structure of frontier governance. During a break, Reynolds found them in an anteroom. You're doing well. The media response is overwhelmingly positive. But there's something you should know. Malkin's lawyers are here. They want to make a deal. No deals, Salira said immediately. Hear them out. It might be worth it. The lawyers were exactly what Daniel expected: smooth, expensive, and utterly without conscience. They laid out their offer with practiced efficiency. Governor Malkin is willing to provide evidence against his entire network in exchange for a reduced sentence. Names, dates, financial records, everything. He enslaved hundreds of people, Salira said coldly. He destroyed my squadron. And he can help you save thousands more. Without his cooperation, the investigation could take years. How many more will suffer in that time? Daniel wanted to refuse, but he saw the logic. As much as it burned to let Malkin escape full justice, the information he could provide would save lives. What kind of reduced sentence, he asked. 20 years instead of life. Minimum security facility. Possibility of parole in 10. No parole, Salira said. 20 years. No possibility of early release. And he testifies publicly. No sealed depositions. No protected testimony. He faces his victims. The lawyers exchanged glances. We'll need to consult with our client. They left, and Reynolds nodded approvingly. Well played. You'll get your justice and the information. It doesn't feel like justice, Salira said. It rarely does, but it's better than letting the network survive. The hearings continued for 3 more days. Other witnesses were called, including Dr. Caldwell via secure transmission from Taralis 4. The evidence was overwhelming, and by the end, the Senate voted unanimously to restructure frontier governance and establish new protections for all citizens, human and hybrid alike. As they left the Senate building for the last time, Daniel felt a mix of exhaustion and exhilaration. They'd done it. They'd actually changed things. So what now? Reynolds asked. The military would be happy to reinstate both of you. Full commissions, choice of assignments. Thanks, but no, Daniel said. I think we're done with military life. Reynolds smiled. I heard you mention something about cargo runs to the frontier. Someone needs to make sure the new laws are being followed, Salira said. And to help people who fall through the cracks. A watchdog operation. I like it. Unofficial, but necessary. Reynolds handed them a data pad. Contact information for people who might help. Funding sources. Allies in the government. You won't be alone out there. As Reynolds walked away, Salira turned to Daniel. Ready to start our new life. With you always? They walked out into Earth's sunlight. The first natural light Daniel had felt in years. It was warm and clean. Nothing like Taralis 4's gray rain. But he found himself missing that rain, the underground, the people who'd risked everything for freedom. We should go back, he said. To Taralis 4. Make sure the reconstruction is going well. Webb sent a message yesterday. They've established a provisional government with Caldwell advising. The registrar is functioning properly. People are rebuilding. Then we go where we're needed most. The frontier colonies. The places where people like Malkin think they can operate without oversight. They found a small cargo ship for sale at the orbital shipyard. Nothing fancy, but solid and reliable. Daniel used his severance pay from 3 years of clerical work. While Salira contributed her military pension, it was just enough. What should we call her? Salira asked, running her hand along the hull. How about second chance? 2 on the nose. Besides, this is more like our 3rd or 4th chance. True, Daniel thought for a moment. The midnight hour. Why? Because our story started with one night. Might as well honor that lie that became true. Salira laughed. I did lie, didn't I? Worst lie I ever told. Best lie you ever told. As they prepared for departure, messages came in from their scattered allies. Marcus and Jorik had decided to start a technical consulting firm, helping colonies upgrade their systems with proper safeguards. Kira was training new pilots, teaching them to fly and to question orders when necessary. Webb and Tam were rebuilding Taralis 4's underground into a legitimate advocacy organization. Look at what you started, Daniel said, showing Salira the messages. What we started. None of this would have happened if you hadn't opened your door that night. You would have found another way. Maybe, but I'm glad I found you instead. They launched from Earth orbit as the sun set over the Pacific, heading back toward the frontier. Their cargo hold was full of medical supplies and educational materials for colonies that needed them. It wasn't much, but it was a start. You know, Salira said as they entered hyperspace, I never did pay you back for that first night. The rental fee. Consider us even... No, I insist. 1 night's rental at standard rate, plus interest. She pulled up a calculation on her screen. Comes to approximately 1 lifetime of partnership. That's some interesting math. I'm very good with numbers. Daniel laughed and took her hand. Outside, the stars streaked past as they headed toward their new life. Behind them, Earth continued its ancient rotation, and the Senate continued its deliberations. The registry scandal would make headlines for months, and the trials would go on for years. But for Daniel and Salira, the fight was both over and just beginning. They'd won their freedom and helped others win theirs. Now came the harder task of making sure that freedom meant something. "Hey," Salira said suddenly, "want to know a secret?" "Always." "That night, at your apartment, when you made me tea, that was the first time in months anyone had offered me something without expecting anything in return." "It was terrible tea. It was perfect tea." She squeezed his hand. "And you were wrong, by the way." "About what?" "You said you weren't anybody special, but you were. You are. You're the man who opened the door when everyone else would have walked away." Daniel thought about arguing, but instead just held her hand tighter. They had a long journey ahead, full of uncertain destinations and dangerous possibilities. But they'd face it together. Two people who'd found each other in the rain and discovered that sometimes the biggest revolutions start with the smallest acts of kindness. The ship's computer chimed, indicating they'd successfully entered hyperspace. Their course was set for the frontier, where people still needed help and justice was still a rare commodity. "Ready for whatever comes next?" Daniel asked. Salira smiled, that fierce, determined expression he'd come to love. "With you, I'm ready for anything." And as the midnight hour carried them toward their future, Daniel realized that for the first time in years, so was he. The failed soldier and the escaped slave had become something more: partners, lovers, and guardians of the freedom they'd fought so hard to win. Their story had begun with a lie about one night. It would continue with a truth about one life. Live together, making the universe a little better, one small act at a time. Behind them, Earth grew smaller. Just another point of light among billions. Ahead, the frontier waited with all its challenges and possibilities. They were going home, not to a place, but to a purpose. And that, Daniel thought, was the best home of all.